Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Soldovia City Council, Monday, March 14th, 2022, and the time is 6:02 p.m. We'll go ahead and do roll call. Sweat,
Here.
Rojas,
Here.
Kennedy,
Here.
Swick,
Here.
Peyton,
Here.
and Nathan.
Mayor,
Is George here or is he out tonight?
if I may, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, you bet.
I did speak with George briefly before this meeting. He was able to attend the work session, but he is not going to be able to attend the regular meeting. He's asked for an excuse.
Okay, sounds good. So he will be excused for this evening. Okay, sounds good. We have 5 out of 6 members present. We do have a quorum. And let's see, Rachel, since if you're in there, if you go, we'll go ahead and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
You bet.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, item D, agenda approval. We'll go ahead and look for a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Motion to approve tonight's agenda. Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve this evening's agenda by Rojas, second by Sweat. Any additional discussion before we vote? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote on the agenda approval tonight. All those in favor, Sweat,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Swick.
Aye.
Peyton.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 5-0 with 1 absent. Motion, let's see, agenda is approved. Item E, consent agenda. All items under the consent agenda are approved with a single motion, no discussion, and 1 vote. A council member may request to remove any item for discussion and a separate vote. Items removed from the consent agenda will be placed under new business. Tonight's consent agenda consists of item 1, approval of minutes from the regular meeting, February 28th, 2022, and minutes of the special meeting for March 7th, 2022. The second item on tonight's consent agenda is ordinance introduction. We have 1 for introduction tonight. That's ordinance 22-11, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Soldovia, Alaska, amending Soldovia Municipal Code Title II, Sections 2.32.070, voter qualifications, and 2.32.080, election board, and 2.32, 1.40, or 1.140, disposition of challenged ballots, and 2.32.150, absentee voting. And there's a recommended public hearing date of April 11th on that one. Information on that item is found on page 5 of your packet. The third item tonight on the consent agenda is an action memorandum 22-05, confirming the appointment of Henry Kroll to the Soldovia Planning Commission. And that is found on page 10 of your packet. Does any member wish to remove any item for separate discussion at this time?
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Yep, go ahead, Heidi.
that those sets of minutes, both the regular and the special meeting minutes, are not provided in the packet. They will be provided at the next regular meeting.
Okay, yep, gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, does any member wish to remove any item at this time? Okay, hearing none, we will go ahead and look for motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda by Sweat, second by Swick. Any further discussion on tonight's consent agenda before we vote?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if it was, I don't see Jen on here, but is she on? That was me who said a second, but did Jen also?
Yeah, Jen
Okay.
Swick could beat you,
No.
just beat it to it.
That was Vivian.
Oh, was it Vivian? Oh,
Might have.
sorry about that. Okay, that was
That's fine.
Vivian on the second. Okay, we will go ahead and vote on tonight's consent agenda. All those in favor, Sweat,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Swick,
Aye.
Peyton.
Aye.
Okay, motion is approved 5-0 with one absent. Okay, that concludes tonight's consent agenda. Item F, mayoral proclamations. We have none tonight. Item G, public presentation for prior notice. Each presenter has up to 10 minutes, and Cindy Mom is signed up for this evening for a presentation on the Otterbond Trail, and this can be found on page 13 of your packet. And Cindy, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you. You should get the microphone there. Yep.
Wasn't sure where I should stand. I feel like I have my back to someone no matter where I go. Is this on? Okay.
Yep.
So just so I know who the audience is, I can't see virtually, but has everybody here walked the Otterbahn at least once? Yeah, okay, great. So I would say I'm an Otterbahn enthusiast. I probably do it about once a week. And back in November, I posted on the Chatterbox the results of 10 years of logbook sign-ins and got a huge number of responses and interest and people being enthusiastic about the Otterbahn. So Rachel Friedlander at that point asked me if I would do a presentation at City Council and just talk about the results of the logbook. And so just a summary, it's from January of 2012 until December of 2020. And we had visitors from 49 states plus Washington, DC, and 39 countries. So if you look at page 14 in the packet, it has a breakdown. And I actually sat down and did chicken scratch and counted up all the signatures in there. Arkansas is the one state we didn't have any visitors from. I don't know what's going on there. And then Caleb Billmeyer got interested in the data and he created the maps that you see where it kind of breaks down and you can visualize where people came from, including, so for the lower 48, the map on the bottom of that page shows that it's adjusted for per capita. So it accounts for population. Like California, of course, has a bigger population. And so that's why it's dark on that top map. So it gives you kind of an idea, like northern tier states, mountain states is where some of our visitors are coming from. And reading the books, you know, people come here. Some people just come here to hike the Otterbahn. They do that annually. They do it on somebody's birthday or as a wedding anniversary or special occasion. And then they leave and go home. And maybe they visit Main Street. But in looking at these books, what I realized was there's like maybe even a different user group compared to people who come, they want to just go out to lunch at the boardwalk and walk up and down and maybe do some shopping. So just a little bit of past history. The trail was built in 1989 and 90 by Susan B. English school students during a 3-week period. And that original trail went across some private property. And in 1996, that part of the trail was closed along the cliffs. And that's when the trail was relocated to the section line easement. So since 1997, the trail has retained the form that you see today, which includes that boardwalk that goes across the big wetland. So it's about a mile long, starting from behind the school next to the sock. And if you do it as a round trip, and maybe if you do it at a low enough tide and come back on the road, it's like the perfect 10,000 steps. So it's like a really good resource for locals. I know a lot of people use it kind of as their workout. I, of course, usually do it slower and look for birds and wildlife as I'm going. So this, I just want to stress that it's a really great resource and amenity for Seldovia. And it's also entirely private land. All we have is an easement. And so just thinking about the future, it is, I think, really important to realize that, and that the experience of hiking the Otterbahn the way it is right now could go away. If the landowners decided to subdivide, develop, log, etc. So there's a bunch of different tools available for keeping natural lands natural, which we do have a local land conservancy right across the bay in Homer, who work with private landowners and with public landowners to make sure that areas like this, and this is about a 200-acre natural area as it is now. I do want to acknowledge George and Amy Rainier, who have been really supportive of the trail and open to ideas for trail improvements and good stewards of the land. So like when we've had these huge storms, December of 2015, and then again, Thanksgiving of 2019, and lots of trees came down. We do have a section of the trail that we had to reroute to go outside of the easement. And George and Amy allowed us to do that. If it was somebody else who wasn't so supportive of the trail, they could have said no. And then what would we do? You know, you have to build a ladder or something to create a connection. So it's a really amazing trail. It is also possible that it's going to change in coming years due to climate change. With a lot of the trees coming down, they are mature Sitka spruce that sort of dodged the bullet of the spruce bark beetle infestation. So we have some really big trees in there. But in the future, we're trying to diversify the forest a little bit. The Climate Action Team Seldovia has planted red cedar, Siberian larch, and paper birch, and maybe in the future, yellow cedar and western hemlock are possible trees that might get planted in there with landowner permission. So I'm probably already at my 10 minutes. I mean, it didn't keep track of the time, but
You're fine. You got a few extra minutes.
okay, great. So I would just encourage the city of Seldovia to think about future management of this area and trying to potentially work with the private landowners to kind of all be on the same page about that. And the Kachemak Heritage Land Trust would be a really great resource for starting that conversation. I don't think we've ever talked about that kind of stuff here. I attended virtually the work session from starting at 4:30 today. And part of the land use management plan that I would really like to see, and I think others in town too, is talking about trails, natural areas, parks and recreation, and how we can create new experiences in natural areas and take care of the ones that we already have. Some of our city parcels already qualify as pretty amazing natural landscapes. So just as we move forward and we think about disposing of parcels and developing parcels, if we can strategically do that, keeping in mind that some of them, maybe the highest and best use is as a trail or as a natural area. And so if anybody wants to take a look at these logbooks, I brought them in. And here's just an example of Homer's non-motorized transportation and trail plan from, I believe it's from 2004. So they sat down and figured out what if scenarios and what we're looking at, what we'd like to see in the future, and how can we have a more walkable and bikeable city. And some of the trails that are new in Homer in the last decade came out of this plan. So just it's as a conversation that we're already having with looking at the land use management plan, the Otterbahn, it would be really great if that could be the first step in thinking into the future of how we want to take care of those amazing resources. So thanks for the opportunity to talk. And this is our current logbook. I'll put it back after we look at it tonight, but This one was not included in the numbers, and just in 2021, we had over 500 sign-ins. So that's higher, it's getting more use as we go. And there's an actual hashtag Otterbahn and Otterbahn Trail. So, it's a really great public outreach and tourism, whatever, access to Seldovia. So, any questions or?
Cindy, I wanted to say thank you so much for coming and sharing your time with the council and the community tonight, as well as all the effort you put into compiling that data. I think if anything, as the city looks towards how can we generate more revenue or become a more sustainable city and community, looking at marketing what we already have and taking care of it and stewardship. So I hear you when you're saying, well, what's the future of the trail? So just thinking about, you said over 30 countries have been 39 countries have been to the Otterbahn Trail, which ultimately means to Seldovia, as well as almost every single state in that time period, which is just amazing statistics from an economic development standpoint. So thank you for sharing that with the city.
Right. Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, Cindy.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. I appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor? Mr.
Yep,
Mayor,
go ahead.
I have a
Yep.
question for Cindy.
Yep, you bet. Go ahead.
So I guess I have forgotten what actually the Otterbahn Trail, is that just a trail created? It's not a right of way or anything like that? Or what
It-
exactly is it? I've forgotten.
It is, I didn't actually do that part of the research. But what I have always heard and been told by Brett Higman and Jerry and Sandy Murray is that it is a section line easement. Now, I don't know all the technical aspects of that. I was kind of more interested in the numbers of the users and looking at that kind of information, and also who owns the land along there. So my understanding is 17B is a thing that's thrown around a lot for easements. I don't know if that's what this is, but it runs right along the section, the surveyed sections. So there's a private landowner on each side. It's like an
Right.
imaginary line. And I also didn't realize that Heidi was compiling all the easements and all the leases and everything in the land use management plan. But if we hold an actual easement on that, it should be in the land use management plan. I haven't looked at it.
Heidi, could you answer that question? Because I don't just remember right now.
Mayor, if I may,
Yep, you bet.
search it a little bit further, but from my understanding is that the city does not hold an easement. It is a public line easement, and there was discussion in the past about the city pursuing easement. Don't know the history and why that was never, there was no follow through with that from my understanding. I do not think the city at this time has any legal, I believe it's all just it's a public use section line easement. I don't think the city has a stake in it, but I'll double check.
Yeah, that would be really worth looking into, I think. And also, prescriptive use, like we can prove that we've been using it at least since 1997, portions of it. So if it ever came to a legal question, that's important information. And so these logbooks are important to keep into the future, also to prove that people have used it. Just thinking ahead, that's kind of scary. I mean, that's really scary to me as a trail user, that if we don't actually hold any kind of legal rights to it.
Well, that's what I was wondering,
Yeah.
because it would seem to me, unless we decide to do something at some point in time, that trail could, like you said, very well go away with the private landowners, unless they're all into that trail and would be willing to do, whatever it takes to keep that. So
Right.
that'd be interesting.
I haven't done any kind of survey or contact with I mean, I'm friends with George and Amy, but other landowners around there, I didn't look into it before, doing this. The
Yeah.
parcel map, I got all that information from the Kenai Borough Parcel Viewer. So it should be current as to owners. But yeah, so growing up and living in the Midwest and New England, I've seen many beloved natural areas that are favorite hikes or places I'd like to go to ski that went away because
Well,
they
I'm sure.
were not protected in any way. So
Yeah,
I'd hate to see that here.
that's a good point.
Okay.
So, thank you.
But on a positive note, it's a great trail. Get out and hike it. It's not even icy anymore. So it's in good shape, except that there is a new tree down, I noticed this week.
Thanks, Cindy. Appreciate it.
If I may clarify just one more time, I'm sorry, I may not have spoke clearly. I do believe there is a section line easement. There is an easement there, so that would have to go away if there was, if owners wanted to change it. But I believe I have put my eyes on it. There is an easement. It's just that it doesn't belong to the city. So hopefully that clarifies it for people. There is an easement. It is available for use. It just doesn't belong to the city.
Yep, that's pretty clear. Thanks, Heidi. Okay, we'll move on to item H, public presentations for items not on the agenda. And item 1 is in your packet. There's an SNA letter of opposition to ADL 233866. And this is in regards to the new trail that is being proposed along from Rocky Ridge. Yeah, coming off Rocky Ridge over to Red Mountain. So, and this is a letter of opposition from SNA. Was there anyone going to call in or anything, Rachel, tonight, or anybody else representing them, or just provided in the packet?
Just written comment provided for the packet.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if anyone from council had any additional comments, or questions pertaining to the letter or the trail. All right. We'll go ahead and move on to item I, committee and advisory board reports, and we don't have any scheduled for tonight. Item J, administrative reports. We have the chief of police report, and that is on page 19 of the packet. That's pretty short and sweet. I don't know, Clayton, did you have anything? I know it's not time for written, but did you have any additional opportunity for you to speak if you wanted to say anything at all?
No, thanks, Mayor.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, item K, public hearings, none. Item L, unfinished business, none. Item M, new business. Item M1, discussion on the strategic meeting with Alaska Permanent Capital Management Company regarding investment of the Soldovia Permanent Fund. And I will go ahead and turn it over to staff. This will be found on page 20 of your packet.
Thank you, Mayor. So this agenda topic is a follow-up to the work session council had on February 22nd. Council had a few questions. First, curiosity in what $500,000 versus $540,000 could look like in terms of investments under different portfolios with APCM. What would the difference the first year look like if you only had $500,000 versus $540,000 and more. And so after our work session meeting, I called Blake Phillips of APCM and ran those scenarios by him and asked him to touch base with the council on those types of questions. And the hope is after this discussion tonight that council will have set the amount that you want to start investing the Soldovia Permanent Fund at, as well as what model or portfolio of investment do you want to start the Soldovia Permanent Fund at. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Blake Phillips with APCM to take us through the conversation and dialogue. And they did send over items that should look familiar in the council packet starting on page 20.
Okay, thank you, Rachel.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep, we got you loud and clear, Blake.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time tonight. So if you turn to page 1, there's going to be basically two main goals for this evening. One is going to be determine the correct asset allocation that is kind of the optimal fit for the permanent fund. And then we want to kind of detail investment policy language that should go into code that adds, the appropriate goals and also allows the appropriate investments, while also adding guidelines to make sure that you don't get into investments that are inappropriate. So with that, if we move to page 2, this is really just laying out the main, during the planning phase of our investment process is probably the most important, and we spend the most time as we have with Seldovia. And this is also a process that's going to be revisited annually, and it's important to do that because as investment managers, we don't just kind of tell you what's best for you. It's important that we hear what the goals and what risk tolerances and things like that are most important, and then we design the portfolio around that. And so it's important that we check in at least annually to make sure that nothing has changed on your side, as well as giving you an update on the markets. So goals that we've determined for the permanent fund include the inflation protection, time horizon, which for a permanent fund tends to be perpetual, which increases the ability to take risk because you have a long time horizon to kind of go through various cycles, distributions, and then kind of growth targets. Within policies, probably the most important one we're going to talk about is risk tolerance. And I say that because the last thing that we want to do when picking in asset allocations is get enticed by the higher return numbers without fully appreciating the downside risk. And when you go through periods of turbulence and people get uncomfortable, and also it's important to think about, there's changeovers in staff and city council. And so you always want to be thinking about what, generally everyone would be comfortable with, because if you change to a more conservative allocation in the middle of something like COVID or the Ukraine situation that we're going through right now, that's really the best way to kind of destroy value, because you're going to lock in those losses rather than being able to stay the course with the existing risks that are in the portfolio. So I have some numbers around that we'll get to. The second item is liquidity minimums. And so that would kind of deal with making sure that any kind of distributions are going to be able to be met. I'll also add there that all of the investment vehicles that we use are very liquid. So it's not ideal in certain markets to be selling them due to price movement, but they are extremely liquid with very low transaction costs, if any. Tax considerations, there are pretty much none. And then asset class preferences is what we're going to be going into here in a second. And then finally, the expectations. So lowest risk option maximizes risk return payoff. We try to pick options that are going to complete your goals without taking excess risk. So you don't need to take, we don't view it as an absolute return where you're just trying to hit the ball out of the park every time. We want to attain the appropriate return for the growth goals and not take any more risk ahead of that, because that is just exceeding what you need to do to attain those returns. We'll be continually assessing the market and goal risk. That goes back to the annual review that we'll keep revisiting and kind of have what we call a strategic review every year. and then be able to clearly communicate the probabilities of success. With that, if we could move to the next. So these are three different models that are based off of kind of starting on a kind of a more conservative on the left to a more growth oriented on the right. And the differences between these models are not huge. So, and you'll see that in the return numbers on the next slide, but these are illustrative of all of the different asset classes that we use. So down the left side, you can see within the US, we have large cap equity, mid cap equity, small cap equity, and then there's international equity and emerging markets equity. In the alternatives, you have real estate investment trust, that's REITs, infrastructure investments, and those can be things like cell towers, railroads, airports. Commodities, which is a diversified commodity basket. It's people have a tendency to think, especially in Alaska, that it's going to be extremely energy weighted, but it has a nice spread of everything. So including agriculture, metals, etc. And then alternative beta, which is a tool that we use for lessening or dampening volatility. And so that's something that we've been utilizing this year. As we came into the year with most of our clients' portfolios, we were expecting elevated volatility coming out of the extremely strong market that we've seen from the rebound out of COVID due to all of the central bank easing and all the stimulus that the federal government has put forth. And so post that, we do still have a constructive outlook on the economy, but we're expecting that volatility to tick up. And so that's a tool that we can utilize to lower the volatility in the portfolio. And then the bottom is the fixed income section. So that's your bonds. And even though bonds are kind of yielding very low rates right now, they are an important kind of foundational piece for a portfolio, because when you do hit these periods of turbulence like we are right now with the Ukraine-Russia situation, it's important to have those safe haven assets, because there is a flight to safety when you do hit those periods, and those help anchor it when you have the stock portion of the portfolio falling down. And so as you go across, you can see on the very top line, so the total equity or stocks, on Model 4, you have 39% stocks versus 53% in the Model 6, with Model 5 being in the middle. So about 14% more. And so what that leads to is just higher return expectations. There is a higher risk expectation, but also a commensurate higher return. Alternatives pretty much stay relatively the same across the middle. Again, those REITs, infrastructure, commodities are very good at inflation hedging. And then alternative beta, as I mentioned, is a volatility dampening tool. And then finally, fixed income. As you can, on the far left, which is the most conservative, you have a higher allocation to bonds. So we do expect low returns, but we do expect them to be positive. And then if you go to the far right, the ability to fund that extra stock allocation is funded from less fixed income. Can I answer any questions about the specific portfolios as it relates to asset classes or composition?
Yeah, does anyone on council have any questions? I've got one real quick, Blake. You mentioned the obviously we're seeing in terms of the international equity and the international fixed income. What is your guys' take on that right now? I mean, is it stick and stay with what you have going on in Russia, or is that are you guys following suit with a lot of other bigger companies? I know it gets real tricky when you're talking a long-term asset portfolio. You just can't necessarily dump it overnight without costing people, millions or hundreds of millions of dollars? It's kind of a loaded question, but I'd be curious to just hear what your take is on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm actually glad you asked that because these represent the strategic benchmarks that we would pick for the portfolio, or basically the target allocation. And then, but outside of that, as a discretionary manager, we have the ability to take tactical tilts. And what that means is that we may, in a vacuum, you're pretty much never, as the markets move, you're never going to be right on that strategic allocation. But in addition to that, so for last year, for example, we had most of our clients overweight stocks ahead of where their target allocation is, because we were expecting that strong economic reopening, COVID to improve, and there was just lots of stimulus in the market. And so that would be an example of, we're probably, for Model 6, we'd probably be up at like 56, 57, 58% on stocks last year. This year, a bit different. And one of the areas where we have pulled back is actually the two areas that you mentioned, international equity and international fixed income. So we're actually underweight those in most of our portfolios versus the US, based upon some very, a lot of the different things going on globally.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that response. That seems pretty appropriate. And you guys obviously always have to be one step ahead of, by the time we see it in the news, if you haven't reacted, you've probably already missed the boat. So yeah, no, I appreciate your response on that. Anyone else?
And I might just add, so the on the asset classes, just another thing to note. So we use primarily exchange traded funds with some mutual funds where we can't get exposure the way we would like to. But so with the exchange traded funds, that's not just, one US large cap, general thing that you own. You actually own thousands of underlying securities through that. And the way exchange trader funds you are set up, you literally actually own fractions of or different shares in those companies that can actually be delivered to you. So that's an important piece of that, is to realize the level of diversification that you have within these securities, because that takes out what we call unique risk or individual company risk, and is an important part of the risk management process. With that, we can move to the next slide. So when we're looking at different portfolios to recommend for clients, a lot of what we're looking at is we do what are called Monte Carlo simulations. And those are, it's a computer program that we run that runs 5,000 different simulations over a 10-year period. And that's going to encompass all sorts of things, from interest rate movement, inflation, various different global GDP growth numbers, commodity price, just a huge amount of things. And then it kind of gives us all of those different scenarios that can play out. And from there, we can kind of create probabilities and ranges for the risk and return. And so if you look at the top line there, so on the most conservative model, you'll see it says 5.8%. So that's the average return in any given year over the next 10 years. But in any given year, that could include being down 11% or up 23%. And so you'll see if you go over to Model 6, so we'd have that higher return of 7%. And then you can see the downside risk, though, is also higher at negative 15%. And the reason I focus on that risk piece is because if we have 29% or 23%, I think everybody's going to be pretty happy. But you want to be willing to have a bumpy ride and potentially have those down years and be able to stay the course. That's why I really just focus so much, and not to be pessimistic, but that it's really important that there's comfort around that level. And being a permanent fund, you do have the ability to take that higher level of risk. And the majority of permanent funds do tend to be over towards the right side because they have that risk capacity and that longer ability to take risk. And so when I say that kind of risk capacity and longer term, that's when you compare it. So if you had, for example, like a capital reserve fund where you were maybe going to be investing for 3 to 5 years, and then you were going to be building a new building or road or something along those lines, you can't take as much risk in that because you don't have as long of a time frame. And so you don't have as much ability to deal with gyrations in the market as you would with the permanent fund. And also you're going to have a lower level of distributions from the fund as a percentage of the overall assets. Then if you drop down 2 lines there where it says net earnings. So the reason we put net earnings in there is you'll hear us talk a lot about sustainable rate of distribution. And what the sustainable rate of distribution is so we inflation protect it. That's which removes 2%, which is our long-term inflation goal, even though we're well above that right now. The majority of that effect is due to supply chain issues, and the situation in Ukraine has just exacerbated that further. I think we had the largest inflation print that we have had in decades, just this past one. But we do expect that to moderate. There is going to be potentially some level of it hanging out higher because we have had wage inflation. So it's something we are definitely watching close, but we do expect that to come back down. So we want to inflation protect the permanent fund because that's going to keep the purchasing power going forward. If we don't do that, that purchasing power just gets less and less. So then we're left with the net earnings. And so that is what we view as the sustainable distribution level. You don't necessarily have to take it, but we don't recommend taking any more than that level if you want to continue to grow the fund going forward into the future. And so that gives you an idea of what that level of earnings can look like. And so oftentimes in the beginning of permanent funds, you might, as they grow from smaller to larger, municipalities may not draw upon them as frequently or to the sustainable rate in order to kind of foment more growth. And then finally, that bottom line is average loss in extreme conditions. So these are kind of tail risks, as you see. And so that's basically kind of less than 2.5% of outcomes are going to be in that kind of range. And those are kind of what you would expect to experience. I think a good example would have been March 2020 when the S&P was down 30%. These are the kinds of returns that you can experience along the way, kind of during the horizon. And so it's important. I think that's also a good example of why it's important to stay the course. So we had the S&P 500 down 30% at one point during COVID, and the market ended up over 10% for the year. So when you have these periods of turbulence, it's really important to stick with the investment plan that you've decided upon. And we're always going to be reevaluating it. It's not, put it in place and then forget about it. We're always going to be monitoring and reviewing it. But it is important to, stay within those general parameters. Can I answer any questions about the risks?
Any questions from anyone? Nope, looks like you're good to keep on trucking.
Okay. If we keep moving. So, and then finally, so these are the wealth simulations. This is also from the Monte Carlo simulation. And so all of these simulations you see on the right are starting with 500,000, and then each of the models gives you an idea of where that is going to be in 10 years. So the 50th percentile line, which we view as the good spot to use for planning purposes, you can see trending anywhere from 854,000 to 938,000 in the Model 6. And then what you see in that blue box is 50% of the outcome. So in all likelihood, it's going to be somewhere within that blue box. And then you have the tails of the green and the red, both of which are much less likely, and represent, that big line and range of out. As you get further away from that blue box, there's just less and less of those outcomes and lower probability. So really for planning purposes, you want to really stay in that blue box. And you can see that even though it's only, 1.2% additional return from Model 6 versus Model 4, you're adding almost $100,000 over the 10-year period through that compounding. And so I think the rest is going to be more talking about kind of the code and having the proper setup for that. But one of the main points here would be to decide on a model that you think is most appropriate. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Blake. All right. Any questions, direct questions from council for Blake?
Mr. Mayor, did I miss something when we asked about if we were to invest 500,000 or if we were to invest 540,000? Do we have? Did he give a slide on that? I'm not sure, because I know that was one question the council needed to decide on, and that was how much is our investment? And then the other part of that question is, generally this investment is looked at for a long-term, at least a 10-year investment, theoretically. And then could you explain if the city decided that they needed to, after X amount of years, take out X amount of dollars, how does that work? Or is that where that one slide talking about?
The net earnings, yep.
Yeah. Could you explain that a little bit? Yeah, the net earnings at that if you went with Model 5, be 4.1%, roughly.
Right. So when you take that net earnings number, or also what we would call the sustainable distribution rate, that is the amount that you could withdraw and not have it eat into the principal of the fund, while also inflation protecting it. So it will be growing, but that modestly, but that 2% a year. But that's just growing with inflation. And then if you choose to take a distribution, you can take that 4.1% without having the fund start shrinking. When you take more than that, you're going to have it trend downwards over time. If you take less than that, we would expect the growth levels to rise faster.
And when would you be able to pull that out? When would you be able to actually use that net earnings? At what year? Or is there even a caveat as far as that goes?
Those net earnings numbers are annualized.
Okay.
Just quick math for the council. It's 20 on that 4.5 on the highest scenario. On the 500, it's $20,500 annual.
Say that again, Mr. Mayor.
It's $20,500 annually if everything came to fruition and you achieved your goals and your net earnings were truly 4.5%. If that was the distribution you were going to take based on the 500 investment, you could take out $20,500 annually on that against the principal and not touch the principal.
Okay, thank you. And then going back to my original question before I threw in the other one about, was there a sheet that told the council the difference of the investment of 500,000 versus 535, or what was it?
Yep. So I don't have a slide of that, but I can tell you the number. If you go to that wealth simulation slide, the comparable numbers for that for 535,000 for Model 4 would be 914,000. Model 5 would be 968,000, and Model 6 would be just over 1 million.
What was the middle number? I'm sorry. You had a Model 5.
968,000.
968, okay. Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, Vivian. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, go ahead.
So those numbers, what was that, a $500,000 investment versus, I'm not sure I got that.
Versus the 535, I think is what he was saying.
Oh,
So in a nutshell, it's on the spectrum. On the low end, it's 40. It's depending on the model. It's anywhere between 40 and let's call it 60,000, 35 to $60,000 over the depending on which one you are, over a 10-year period. So if you only put in 500,000, then you're going to reach your target goals. If you put in 535,000 initially, then the lower one, it's an additional, I didn't get that exact number, 30 to 35,000. Then it goes up to about 62,000. Then it goes up to over 70 or 80,000 on the highest one on scenario 6. And that's over a 10-year period.
okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Any additional questions? Okay. Let's see, Rachel, is the idea for Blake to stay on, or is he good?
Yeah, so Blake, I believe, also wants to touch on the code changes and making
Oh.
recommendations to code changes, but we do need to decide what model, which can translate to, model 5 being moderate, like the middle of the road, model 6 high risk, model 4 low risk, and then what amount, 500,000 or 540,000.
Okay, so do we wanna go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, if I could just add one thing. So kind of the best path on for permanent funds when we're picking these asset allocations is that we found is to pass a resolution in which we can help Rachel put together, and where you drop in kind of the asset allocation for the model that is chosen. And then also we memorialize what we expect that sustainable distribution rate to be, so that both of those things are locked in writing. And then those, when we change and anytime we adjust the model, those will be passed by resolution and memorialized that way too. And then the code changes that I would talk about here in a second, those are more kind of permanent and meant to be, permanent guidelines with which to, be the umbrella rules over the entire fund.
Then those would basically be your two benchmarks that you might, that on the annual review that we would weigh the review against to see if we're, where we're at. Is that how I understand that?
That is correct. Yeah, the asset allocation table within the resolution is going to be basically a pro rata share of each of those asset classes, and that's your yardstick to make sure we're doing what we said.
Yeah, and then that helps future councils, new people. We've got something in writing, in code for those folks to know what our goals are and whether we hit them or not.
Exactly right.
Okay, perfect. All right, Rachel, do we want to go ahead and have him just touch on the code items, and then we'll just have our discussion all at once after that, or?
You bet.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Blake.
Okay.
Anything additional to add?
Yep. So I can go through this kind of quickly, but the main, so 12.04, where it says replace the entire section, we have shifted from, instead of trying to change the kind of allowable investments, as because indices and various things, they change names all the time. And rather than that, we've added language that really kind of protects against certain types of investing. So not short selling, not using leverage to amplify returns, not using certain kinds of derivatives, and really to protect the fund from kind of inappropriate investments. And we do that also because if we were at some point down the road, if we were unfortunately not your manager anymore, we like to have that language in there to maintain protections and ensure that really you have an appropriate allowable investments. And so that language is in the back there. The next item is the requirement to reinvest 10% or an amount equal to inflation rate, whichever is greater. And so this is one of the things that we try to make sure does not happen in code, is when you have a potentially kind of two different goals at the same time. And so we would consider removing the 10% requirement and utilizing the distribution rate to influence long-term growth of the fund. It's always going to grow faster if you have the ability for any surplus funds to go in there, and that's also going to increase that sustainable draw rate in the future that you have. And so in early days, it's always a good spot to be looking at if you do have those times where you're at a budget surplus. And then finally, the distribution policy. This is just talking about basically going to the resolution and make sure that you're following that sustainable distribution rate.
Okay. So that's just a little more detail on the two items that you mentioned that we really need to have addressed in our resolution. Any questions?
Well, this would be some code changes.
Or
yeah, that would be code changes. The other piece is going to be the resolution, and we're happy to work with staff for any of this code stuff, because I believe you may have to have two readings of it anyway. And we would probably want to finalize that code, which we can help with.
Okay, great. Any additional questions from council regarding the code recommendations? Okay. Okay, let's see here. All right, we want to go ahead and open it up then for council discussion. And then Rachel, did you want Blake to stay on, or what's your thoughts here?
Blake, you're welcome to continue with the meeting or hop off, and I can always fill you in after.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to stay on if anyone has any other questions. So I can stay on for a few minutes.
I have a question for you. So in regards to investing either the 500 or the 540, there was concerns of needing to access money. Can we, if something happens and we need to get to that money, are there any penalties to getting to it? Or can we I know it defeats the purpose of the whole goal of building the fund, but if we needed that money, could we get to it easily?
There would have to be some kind of council vote to go, because the resolution establishes that sustainable draw rate. So if you had a situation where you had to draw above that and go into principal, the fund is set up to kind of protect against that. It's not to say that you couldn't go through that through vote of the council. But that being said, there is no penalty per se of accessing it from us or transaction fees or anything like that. There's no early redemption for any of the funds that we use or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
I think though, Blake, something that Councilmember Swick is kind of touching on too is, say we needed to withdraw funds in March of 2020 when the S&P 500 was down as much as you were saying. that in essence would be a penalty, as if the city was having to withdraw at a time when you weren't making on your investment.
That's exactly right. And that's where we talk about that risk capacity, and the two items that I mentioned, where, so you have the risk tolerance, is going to be, the capacity with the long term. You have the ability to grow that over time, but that is coupled with the distribution level. So when we have those distribution levels that are 3-4% as a percentage of the fund, you're not going to do a lot of damage, even in those kind of down markets, if you were having to distribute at that time. If you start taking larger distributions during those times of turbulence, that's where you kind of get into a more risky situation.
And so
Mr. Mayor.
then,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rachel.
I was just going to ask Blake, so then if the council is on the fence between $500,000 or 540,000, because there's a chance that we may need to withdraw up to 40,000 next year even, what would you recommend?
I always err on the side of conservatism. So, for both your model choice and if there's a chance that you're going to have to withdraw, I would rather see you kind of keep that to the side. And if you don't end up having to need it, you can always put it in later. But instead of kind of undoing all of the, rules that we've been working together to create, I think you potentially just wait to put that in until you have a little more clarity on whether or not you need those funds.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who was next? I didn't catch that. Was that Vivian?
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I appreciate that last question and answer. Thank you. I think what the council needs to remember is that the money that we're investing should be just that, money that we're investing. And we should try to do everything possible to run our city without relying on these funds until we can start making dividends. I'll just use the word dividend, to receive from them. So I think Model 5 would be, I would be comfortable with Model 5. And and I would prefer to put it all in there and have it work for us. But if our city manager believes that we should hold off and look at our finances, then as Blake said, we could hold on to that for a certain amount of time and then just invest it. But I really think we need to really think about consciously what we're doing and what we're trying to do with this program. And that is to invest our monies that we have at the city for the long term to help with our running of the city and try to do what we can to get by without using this money to run our city budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Vivian. Anyone else?
Mayor Campbell.
Yep, go ahead, John.
I appreciate the exercise from the city manager and the fund managers for the questions I had previously. And it's pretty obvious, the differences in the charts provided. I too would pretty much mirror everything that Vivian said, with the exception I tend to be more conservative. I'd like to see us invest in 6, but I'm good with 5, Plan 5, as if that's consistent with the team. The only thing that I'd like to add to that is the 35 or 40,000 that we're pulling out. I'd like to see an annual review of maybe reinvesting that in a year or in 2 years, whatever, wherever we deem from our manager we need to go with that, so that it actually get in the fund where it belongs. That's really all I have.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Yep, go ahead.
I have a question for Rachel. So if we keep that extra money out, where does that end up? What fund does that end up? Or does it go into a permanent fund account all its own again, or what?
Through the mayor, council member Sweat, it'll stay at AMLIP, the Alaska Municipal League Local Investment Pool. So it'll just stay there. Then we'll have our regular operating expenses with Wells Fargo. And then we'll have Charles Schwab hold the permanent fund that APCM manages.
Okay.
So it'll just stay, that little chunk will stay left behind with all of our other grant revenues, which we also keep in
Will
AMLEC.
that earn any interest?
It can.
Is it little?
It's very little.
Little, like we had been. Okay, yeah, that's the whole point. Okay. Yeah. Well, I definitely agree. I think I would do Model 5, err on the, it's right down the middle. I think would be best for us to do that right now.
And do you have any preference on the 500 or the 540?
Well, I say, given our financial situation, I'd like to put all of it in there, but at least the 500 for sure. And like I had said before, I made a comment a while ago, once we started talking about this fund and the interest and everything, it was almost 10 years ago that we first talked about this. And we could be sitting pretty nice now, if that were the case. So, I mean, I'm definitely for investing it for sure. And I think I'd go with the 500,000, keep the other out just in case, especially since we can always put it back in if we all of a sudden become rich as a city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer Harmony, who's next?
Yeah, I'll go. Yeah, I'm good with Model 5 and with the 500, just start with the 500. And then like John said, if we could look next year and see if we don't need it, which hopefully we don't, then throw the rest of it in there. I mean, it's not going to be, so what, we lose a few $1,000s maybe by keeping it out, but it could be, yeah, there could be a need. Hopefully there's not. So yeah, the 500 Model 5, I guess, is my vote.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Harmony, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. As exciting as it would be to put it all in there, I don't know that, I think the Model 5 is the most, is the best we should do right now. Put that 500 in and pray for better times.
Okay, thank you. Yep, I'll go ahead and chime in then too. Yeah, I agree. I think the 500 is the way to go. I think we should, we always have the option of adding. The whole idea behind this, like was, laid out. This is for the future of Soldovia. It's not for this council. It's for the future of Soldovia, and that's what, if they would have done this 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and then we started drawing on what's in there now, we would have $40,000 or $50,000 a year that we could annually draw if this and not impact the principal. So no different than a parent setting up a savings account or a college education for their kids, right? Yeah, it's not for tomorrow. It's for, when they turn 18 and they got to go to college. So, yep, this is very prudent and it needs to be done. I would have no objection with looking at these scenarios, the risk scenarios, putting it in a 6. I don't think there's enough of a delta here between 5 and 6 to hold it to 5, but I certainly respect the opinions of the council. And again, that's something that we can address from year to year as well. If the council has a little better appetite after we get a year or two into this and we decide we want to go, accept a little more risk and go a little higher, then we do it. So, but yeah, 5 is definitely my minimum, and same with the 500. So it looks like to me, it's kind of a slam dunk based on what I'm hearing this evening. So appreciate everyone commenting in on that. Any more questions, comments before we go to public comment? Okay, Anyone from the public care to comment either on Zoom or in the audience?
I'm not seeing any hands at this time.
Okay, we'll go ahead and bring it back to council for final action. And Rachel, the only two things tonight were just the amount to give you direction on the amount, as we've discussed, of the 500 and the asset allocation or model scenario. And it looks like we're all talking about model 5. And then the way I understand it is then you would go ahead and draft up, or we would bring forth a draft ordinance and or resolution for discussion at the next meeting or two, get that discussed. And then we have final action accepting that. And then this becomes a done deal and there's a monetary transfer over to this account to get started. Is that correct?
You got it, Mayor. So I know that we're going to bring it before council in the form of a resolution, as Blake was saying, but a motion at least outlining the initial amount as well as the model would be very helpful.
Okay, perfect. This time we'll go ahead and look for a motion then as discussed.
Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that the city of Seldovia invest in this $500,000 into Model 5 of the permanent fund portfolio options.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Rojas to go ahead and use the initial investment of $500,000 and place it in the Model 5 scenario as laid out in front of us this evening for our permanent fund going forward. We have a second by Swick. Any more discussion before we vote? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor, Sweat,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Swick.
Aye.
Peyton.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-0 with one excused absence. I just want to thank council too. That's I think this is a very prudent move, and it should be very, very exciting in the future for not only us as an administration, but for the future of Seldovia, and the residents should also be happy with this action. So Blake, any closing comments from you? We really appreciate your input and insight tonight. I think the way all this information was laid out made it real simple for us, and was not complicated at all to understand.
I look forward to working with you all. If anything else kind of comes up as we finalize the process, Rachel knows how to get a hold of me. You know, the other thing, just as you were talking about the contribution level or anything, you know, we are able to get in touch with you outside of like the, you know, annual strategic review. If there was, you know, did get clarity and wanted to make a contribution or anything like that, or if there's, you know, anytime there's questions that come up regarding the portfolio, I am reachable. So just wanted to make that clear.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. All right. Well, thank you, Blake. We appreciate it again, your contribution tonight, and we look forward to working with you guys. And yeah, obviously we're looking forward to a long-term relationship here.
All right. Well, thank you all. You have a good evening.
Okay. You too. Appreciate it.
Hey, Mayor,
Yep. Go ahead, Rachel.
is it too late to put in a request for a second motion?
No, we can do that as well.
Just so that it's clear about the remaining portion of the Seldovia Permanent Fund. Just a motion kind of saying that it'll remain an AMLEP. The difference of the Seldovia Permanent Fund will remain an AMLEP, and then will be reviewed annually to see if it should be put into the principal or the bulk of the permanent fund, something to that effect. So that way it's clear, you know, we've decided the $500,000 amount, Model 5, but there's still a portion remaining. So just a motion approving of it staying within AMLEP would be great.
Okay, yeah, we can certainly do that. So yeah, we won't use specifics. We'll just refer to it as remaining portion rather than a specific dollar amount.
Mayor Campbell.
Yep, go ahead, John.
I just have one comment. And I guess it's the conservative speaking, you know, the annual income that we talked about, the number we talked about that could be drawn off the figure, you know, off the fund is about $20,000 if I remember what the mayor said. You know, so if we could, you know, if we could refrain just in 2 years, we could put that 40,000 back is kind of my thought process. And then maybe once the council's more comfortable with the investment and the way these portfolios tend to go, maybe we could transition to the more aggressive down the road. Just some notes. I'm not really looking for, you know, just some food for thought is all.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, I think by our original motion, I think that's kind of automatic in the annual review that,
Right.
Yep. Nope, that sounds good. All right, so we are looking for an additional motion to take the remaining portion above the 500 and have it remain in AMLIP for now until the next annual review.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Yes, and Heidi, if we can just state what the mayor just said, be easier than me repeating exactly just that. If that's okay with you, I'd like to make that motion.
Mayor stated.
As stated, thank you.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Rojas, second by Sweat to go ahead and leave the remaining portion in AMLIP above the 500 and have, at which time that will be reviewed on an annual basis to decide on the disposition of that. So any further discussion before we vote? Okay, all those in favor, Sweat,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Swick.
Aye.
Peyton.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-0 with one excused absence. And that was the second motion. We could have done it all within one, but two will work just fine. So you got everything you need there, Rachel?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, excellent. Okay, thanks again, everyone, for that. Let's see. What time is it here? 7:20. Why don't we take a 5-minute break here real quick for everyone, and then we'll get into this. Then we'll come back and finish up the last two items in the report for the evening, and then go from there. So let's take 5 minutes, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Rachel, let me know when you guys are ready to start up again.
I think we're ready.
Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order here, and we'll pick it up on item M2. And this is a discussion for the review of the 2022 through 2027 capital improvement plan, otherwise known as the CIP. This will be found on page 30 of your packet. And Rachel, I'll let you take it away.
Okay. Let's see here. I have the cover pulled up. The otter to kind of honor Soldovia's symbol, it seems, of the sea otter, but this is a monumental document similar to the city clerk's presentation of the land use management plan. Wonderful to see that come to fruition. We've seen the Soldovia Permanent Fund move towards a positive step in generating more investment income for the city. And now we have the Capital Improvement Program document, which is a different type of investment in our community, where it's trying to line out what are the priorities we foresee for this next 6-year period, 2022 through 2027, that we want to tackle. And some cities, they will use this document in their budget. So they'll say, you know, this was the top priority for water, and we're, as a result, going to fund the project, the first phase of the project, and you'll see it in their budget statement. All of these projects listed in this document are unfunded by the city because we don't have the revenue necessarily to make them happen, but we do have funding requests into the legislature for some of these projects. So given it's 7:30, I'm not going to go through each project page by page, but I'm just going to take us to the table of contents, which is on page 31 of your packet. And it has the major categories within the plan. So we have water capital project priorities, wastewater, marine transportation, surface transportation, public facilities, and rolling stock or fleet. And they're all ranked in order of priority that would be great for the council to consider. And I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have on any of these projects. But I'm hoping that tonight, since this is a draft document with your review, unless you think that there's more work that's needed or more projects that we should put on here, council would be willing to pass a motion of support adopting this plan. And then that way staff can start to use it right away with Senator Murkowski's office, Senator Sullivan's office, Congressman Young's office, and the state. But if it needs more work, no worries. We can use a draft form and send it out to our representatives and then give them a final version once it's ready. So I'm happy to answer any questions from the council, but overall, this is a tool that we're using to communicate what projects, what capital projects, which are usually projects that last a long time and cost more than $5,000, what capital projects we want to see happen within this 6-year period. And they're ranked in order of priority based on things like, will it cause financial harm to the city? Will it generate benefit for the community? Does it compromise health and safety? And so those were factored in when coming up with these projects for the council's consideration. And at the last meeting we had, I believe it was Councilmember Payton kind of commenting on the water and sewer feasibility study and just all of that information. You know, I've had difficulties trying to figure out what projects have we completed and what haven't we, because we haven't necessarily had a tracking method to check off all of the things we've accomplished. But I spoke with CRW and I feel really comfortable with the top water and wastewater capital project priorities that are before you. And then just so that we don't lose sight of other projects that we would like to see happen, but they're not as imperative to happen in this next 6-year period, there is a page called Future Considerations on page 44 through 46 that just shows the future councils and future city staff. These are things that we don't want to lose sight of, and maybe they can make it onto the list at some point. And then lastly, the city put out a request asking for funding organizations that need funding support, so nonprofits or governmental organizations that are also pursuing grant funding. And we received one response from the SURSA for the sport court up at the SOC. And so by the city including projects from other Soldovia organizations in our plan, it helps them be able to say to their granting agencies, oh, the city of Soldovia said that, you know, they support our project priority. So it shows that there's municipal support for that project happening. So we received one submittal, which is also included. And with that, I'm just gonna stop the screen share and see if council has particular projects you're curious about or comments or things you want to see taken off or added. Just open to your questions and feedback.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Any questions or comments from council?
Mayor Campbell.
Yep, go ahead, John.
So to Rachel, city manager, I'm assuming this document be like any of the rest of the documents. We could annually review them and edit them with improvements.
Absolutely, that's the intent through the mayor to Council Member Kennedy. It should be something that we do every single year. It's actually required by code that
Okay.
the city manager provides you the CIP with the budget. So we're a little behind, you know, just so many
Right.
things taking up our time. We finally have this put together, but from here on out, I'm hoping that in the fall time, getting public feedback and then
Well-
bringing it before the council for adoption.
Right, in the essence that we are behind and being able to communicate with the others, meaning at the state level and our representatives and stuff, I would be in favor with moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, excellent document. It's wonderfully laid out. I think it's a perfect program that puts us in a great setting for moving forward. So I am totally in favor of what's been documented here, and moving forward, I'm in favor of using this document in our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Anyone
Mayor-
else?
Mayor, if I
Yep.
may add on to that too.
Yep, you bet. Go ahead.
So council approved an RFP to find us a grant writer to work on water and sewer projects. And so once we select who that grant writer is and we use the ARPA funds that we received to compensate them, they're going to ask, what do you want me to work on? And I'm going to say, I want you to work on look at funding sources for these top water and sewer priorities. So maybe there's a sewer grant coming out that helps residential neighborhoods improve detrimental sewer mains or something. It's like perfect, Block Street. It's our top priority. Let's go for that. And so that's how I'll direct that grant writer's time based on this document.
Perfect. Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment to you, Rachel, that I really appreciate. Because looking at all this, you really got us started on this. I know maybe some of us kind of thought she wants us to do what? When you started those retreats, you called them? Yeah, and asking for our priorities and all that stuff. I can see now where that's led us. And I really appreciate you leading us in that direction, you know, to where we are now with, because as I have been finding out, just from things that you've said and other people have said that, oh, just get a grant, you know, well, apparently getting a grant isn't as easy as we think it is. So there has to be all kinds of other things in place to get us to there. So again, I appreciate you doing all this, and this is really great. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. Anyone else? Okay, I just have a quick comment as well. I think, yeah, looking at this thing and for the first draft, I think you guys did a great job. A lot of work went into this. I really appreciate the, you know, how each section is laid out, and then from the intro, and then a little bit of the history about each project, where it's at, et cetera, et cetera. My only comment would be, obviously, if this is approved tonight or whatever it's approved, just making sure that in terms of document control on the final version that's put out. Every page either needs to have either a header or a footer of the date of this document and or the version of this document. So as the hard copies start to get printed for people, and if people print excerpts or portions of, or certain sections and not the whole document. And then as years go by, to make sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of document control. So that would be the only thing that I would look for. And other than that, I think it's a great start. I think we can put it to use immediately and get going with it. I think this is a huge accomplishment for us too. And then this should only get better as we continue to review and refine this thing from year to year.
Absolutely, Mayor. That's great comments. And I was just speaking with the Kenai Peninsula Borough grant writer. They have a grant writer on staff. And I was telling her about this opportunity, and she was like, that's great, because the Kenai Peninsula Borough wants to make an effort at getting all of these plans from all of the cities around the Kenai Peninsula Borough so that they can put it on their list when they advocate for funding from the state. So now this is just one more tool that we can use to advocate for what our needs are. And I hope that the council directs your constituents to this document, because I think there's a lot of stories about, oh, what happened on Block Street that day, or what's up with our water treatment plant? Isn't it brand new? Like, why do we need to be working on it? So pointing people to this document to kind of tell the infrastructural story of the city and why we need to have a strategic plan. So that way we're not pulled in 1,000 different directions, but instead stay focused on what it is that we need to improve, because a lot of these things are pretty substantial, like the raw water transmission line, which is our top priority. A significant portion of that line, which brings water to our plant, is made of a type of material that has been shown to fail and cause massive water leaks. And we had a water shortage in 2019. So, just staying focused on the vision of improving what infrastructure we currently have so that we can dream bigger for things we'd like to see in the future.
Hey, Rachel, that just reminded me too, while we were talking about that, and unless I missed it here, I was flying through this pretty fast here. And I know there's some little sections where it refers back to maybe where there was a request or something, but it might not be a bad idea. And I'm not saying for today, I'm saying in the future, just to consider, is to have, when we go back up to the table of contents, we've got each of the sections, but maybe in the first one, before we get into the water capital wastewater, is to have a history, because you've already got the information, is to have a history of our funding requests and the type of requests that we did rolled up into this document. So then you don't have a separate document for that. Then the council, future councils, you just look at this one document and say, oh, well, we've been requesting that for the last 10 years. Successful or not successful, the type of funding, was it a raised grant, was it through a block grant, whatever the case may be, was it federal, state request, and just a simple matrix so that folks know and you can simply see the history. And I think you've already got all of that data compiled.
That's a great feedback, Mayor. And that's something too that I think federal agencies look for too, is how many times have they tried? What have they been doing? Because they want to see organizations be successful. So
that would show them how many times they've denied us.
Yes. Or approved us. We've gotten funding, but maybe not for this document, but for next year's. That's a great idea.
Yep. I think we can implement that whenever. So awesome. Any other questions, comments from council before we go to the public? Okay, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. If there's anyone from the public, either in the room or online, that wishes to speak on the draft capital improvement plan.
I'm not seeing any hands at this time.
Okay, sounds good. We'll go ahead and bring it back to council. And I guess, listening to everyone's comments, I didn't hear any big concerns, and I think the document is in great shape to get it. We're in the budget cycle now, and we've got stuff happening quickly here with the number of meetings that we've got on the books here. And it would be great to have this document in our possession and being able to distribute. So I think we're looking for, unless there's any objection, I didn't hear any. I think the city manager is looking for a motion to go ahead and put this into effect and accept this document and get it into circulation.
Mr. Mayor,
Yep, go ahead, Harmony.
I make a motion to approve the City of Sotovia Capital Improvement Program for 2022 through 2027. Is that what you're looking for?
Yep, exactly. Do
Second
we have a
that.
second? Okay, we have a motion tonight by Harmony to accept this version of the capital improvement plan for 2022 through 2027, and a second by Rojas. Any additional discussion before we vote? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote on this. All those in favor, Sweat,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Swick,
Aye.
Peyton.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-0 with one excused absence. We now have a formal capital improvement plan. Wow, we're getting some stuff accomplished here. That's what happens when you talk about it for a long, long time. Sooner or later, we get something in writing that we can use. So that's good work. Again, thanks everyone for your comments on that. And thank you to the administration for putting that together. That will serve us well going forward here. Item M3, discussion, watercraft personal property tax, add Valorum to flat rate, sponsor Rojas. This will be found on page 81 of your packet. I'll go ahead and let the administration speak to this.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to turn the mic over to Councilmember Rojas, but just wanted to share some things that are in your packet. So this topic came about when Councilmember Rojas inquired about, when was it that the city changed from ad valorem, which is taxing for the value of the watercraft, to flat rate, and other questions. So I believe the majority of those questions are found on, let's see, pages 84 and 85 of your packet. So there's email exchanges between the Kenai Peninsula Borough, myself, as well as Councilmember Rojas, and we found out that the change happened sometime between, I believe, 2014 and 2015. So flat rate went into effect in 2015, and we received a watercraft personal property tax revenue of $9,000. When the year prior to that, we were at ad valorem and received $27,000 in revenue. So it was a pretty substantial difference. And Councilmember Rojas was asking, what would that difference look like over that period of 2015 to 2021? And if you just assume the difference in revenue, that 27,000 versus 9,000, if you just take 27,000 times those 7 years, it was almost $190,000 in revenue. And if you look at what we received, basically assuming the $9,000 for flat rate, it's $63,000. So it's a difference of basically $120,000 in revenue for the harbor. It's currently going towards the general fund, but could potentially be revenue for the harbor that the city hasn't received since going from ad valorem to flat rate personal property tax. So that's the information in your packet in the emails. And then starting on page 89 is the Soldovia Municipal Code concerning how we tax watercrafts, as well as on page 93, you can look at the 10-year overview again of the harbor and how we're in our 8th year of a deficit. And you can see that the deficit did start. Looks like from 2012 to 2013, went further down 2013 to 2014. And as a result of that change, further down. And then the Kenai Peninsula Borough did share a chart which showed that there's other communities that do ad valorem taxes in the Kenai Peninsula Borough, including Seward and Kenai. So I'm gonna pass it over to Councilmember Rojas to contribute, but that's just a quick summary of the things that are in your packet.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. You did a great job summarizing. The reason why this came to my attention, we've been talking about where the harbor's at. And it occurred to me back in 2014 or so, the vote that went through for the flat rate tax. And I was one of those people who voted. We had a full room of constituents, all in favor. Our mayor was in favor if he was a proponent of this flat rate tax. And I remember at that time voting yay, but with a caveat on it saying that only because this room is filled with constituents who are in favor of this rate change, and I have no one on the other side of the fence, do I vote yes for this? And with the caveat saying that at some point this will come back to hurt us. And the projection at that time was not this amount of money difference. The number coming out of the office was not this high. So I'm sad to say that the council at that time passed something that has cost us over the years, $126,000 or more. And we did not put into effect any way to recover that money someplace else. And so a light bulb came off in my head saying just that we reduce things, we reduce the whatever in the city that people come to us at council, we reduce rates, but we don't come up with a way to compensate for losing $20,000 a year, $25,000 a year. And for some reason, that is not policy, but it needs to be policy. So looking back on this, what I would like us to do is look at the flat rate formula that we're using right now and wonder if we want to increase it. I would also like the council to consider taking the property or the marine or the vessel tax that we receive now and putting it into the harbor fund. It seems like those people, it seems like there's always, the special funds are set up and it's kind of like apples to apples, oranges to oranges. You don't mix the two when you have special funds. So to me, thinking about it after the fact now and trying to figure out how we're going to help this harbor get out of the red, maybe taking the monies that we receive for the boats that tie up in the harbor. That's what they do. They tie up in the harbor and use the harbor, and that's what they do. They don't go on the roads. And put that money back into the harbor fund. So there's two things. Think about changing where the funds go instead of putting it into the general fund. And then also looking at the rate change of flat rate, what the formula is that we use, and see if we want to change it and increase it. And that's a discussion that we can have when we're looking at how to get the harbor into better monetary standing. But anyhow, lesson learned moving forward to all council members that when we vote yay in a situation and realize that the city is not going to receive X amount of dollars, we need to find or put into the process a way that we recover that money or reduce our expenses that we don't find ourselves in the hole. For now, the operating budget hasn't received $126,000 in the last 7 years. But anyhow, thank you. And any questions you have. Otherwise, our emails back and forth are in their packet, and I hope you've all had a chance to look them over. It's a substantial hit to the city and much greater than it was proposed to be in the beginning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. Appreciate that. Okay, we'll go ahead and open it up for discussion. Who wants to go first?
I will. So you're showing us this harbor, but that money wasn't going into the harbor, correct? It wasn't coming out of the harbor.
Right.
Okay, so that really doesn't coincide with the harbor losing all this money.
Oh, I see your point.
So
Right.
I like the idea of using the tax dollars for the harbor. Can you do that?
Yes, you can allocate the personal property tax revenue for watercrafts into the harbor.
Does it split out? Do you see that it says watercrafts
I
specifically?
can get that detail.
Oh, okay. I do like that idea, especially if we're gonna consider changing any of this. Obviously, I have a lot of boat owners in my ear that are feeling like it's an unfair burden on a small user group to be imposing this tax, then that money is going towards everything. It might be easier to sell it to them that that money is going to go directly into the harbor to what they're using it for. And I do agree that when changes are made, that the downfall financially should be looked at ahead of time. I know that's a hard thing to say, I'm going to pull from here and we're going to make it up here. But I guess that is definitely a responsible thing to do. Yeah. Yeah, that's it for now.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Anyone else?
Mayor Campbell,
Yep, go ahead, John.
just because I'm so new, I'm hoping that you're not looking for a decision tonight is, okay. So we're gonna have time for me to review this, entirely and maybe for some type of public input. And also, maybe other avenues of replacing the funds, correct?
Yes, unless Councilmember Rojas, you wanted a motion tonight. I wasn't expecting one. It was just information that she had requested and wanted included in a discussion. And then just to add to what Councilmember Rojas was saying, there isn't really a formula per se. It's the city came up with, if your vessel is 20 to less than 25 feet in overall length, you pay $30 annually. There isn't really like a formula that we've been following. And so that's what she's saying, in increasing the dollar amounts versus ad valorem, where your boat would actually be assessed for the value. And then that is based on formulas that the borough assessor's office does, I believe.
Yeah, on that. So is there a way to find out how the boats are valued? Because somebody had said something to me about boats depreciating out. So then these older boats are not paying very much tax, even though they're still very much usable, worthy boats, but they're depreciated on paper. I don't know how that works. Is there a way to find
I'm sure, yeah.
out how that
Yeah, I can ask. the
is
borough.
valued? Thanks.
Okay, I'm Mayor Campbell.
Yep, go ahead, John.
So that was my concern as well, is, what burden's going to be put on these boat owners to determine the value of their boat. Are they going to have appraisals done on their boat, which are expensive to determine the value, or who's going to determine the value of these old boats?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, John, to answer your question, it's been the Kenai Peninsula Borough who comes down, just like they assess your property and your home and your house and your business. That's how they assess the boats. But again, I'm not, what I'm asking for, what I'm asking council to look at, and this is a conversation we can have again, is putting the money back into the harbor.
Right.
The money, flat rate tax, put it back into the harbor. That's one thing I'm thinking to help out the harbor. The other thing is looking at our flat rates and see how they compare, or if the council thinks we should increase them. I think we're talking about an increase in mortgage. I can't remember. I've kind of lost track with our fee increase. But for now, I would like to see the council consider taking the flat rate tax and put it into the harbor fund. And then looking at our flat rates and see how much it makes, does it make sense to leave them as they are? They were set in, they haven't changed since we changed this in 2014. Anyhow, I'm not looking for a decision tonight, and I just wanted the conversation to come up and be discussed about what's happened in the past and where we are today, and where are we going in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian.
Mr. Campbell,
Yep, go ahead.
I certainly appreciate Vivian's effort in this, and I see a lot of value in it. I really do. I just have concerns, of course, about the increases in the taxes because I'm currently receiving personal property tax bills from the Kenai Borough for 3 boats and property inside the building. So I understand that well. I just wondered what would be required in, or we could potentially end up with this, so there's parts of it that I definitely like. I just have some concerns. That's all. And I need to read this document yet. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I'll just chime in here real quick. Yeah, I think so. There's 2 pieces to this. The actual tax itself and our is the way we're going about it. Is it relevant to where, it was from 8 years ago? Ad valorem versus flat rate. If you look at our flat rate, we are substantially more than Homer, substantially less than Soldotna, right? So, and you got to remember when you look at the Soldovia City, that's additional on top of what the Kenai Peninsula Borough is charging. So you got to add both of those up. Effectively, when that action was passed in 2014, it was by the revenue was a 66% reduction in revenue over that time. So that's fairly substantial, right? Almost to the percent. So that's a fairly substantial amount of revenue. So so I think that's what everyone needs to look at and think of for future action. Do we want more taxes? Are we happy with taxes? Then the second piece is if it's status quo and stays, I think what Vivian's looking for and the managers that we talk about these funds and obviously try to see about getting them dedicated to the betterment of our harbor. As we know, that's our lifeline here in the city going forward. So we need to recognize that and see if that's where the council wants to go. With that being said, we're obviously still in the middle of starting the budget process here, and we've got fee schedules to look at. We've got a lot of things. We've got a number of things to look at in every department, when it comes to cuts. So I would say anything and everything's on the table. And it's not just throw money at it to fix it, because that's not always the answer. We all know that. That's short term. We got to get to the root problem and fix it. So money typically is a short-term solution, and then you've got to fix the operation to make it long lasting. So, this is a good start. Obviously, it's something that can give something for everyone to consider and think about. And then, I think we'll be able to make a good decision going forward here in the future. Any other questions or comments before we go to public? Okay. Go ahead and open it up for the public. If there's anyone in the room or online that wishes to speak in regards to the watercraft personal property tax.
I don't see any hands at this time.
Okay. We'll go ahead and bring it back to council and any final discussion or final action this evening or final comments.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
I'll talk to the city manager, bring this up again after everybody has a chance to look it over, and we can put it into part of our budget process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's super appropriate. This is good that you brought this up and something to consider. And then obviously as the budget moves, closer to getting finalized. Hopefully there'll be more and more folks in the community that'll weigh in. So it's a little unfortunate that we don't have anyone to comment on this tonight, because I'm sure we'd get an earful if there was, folks are busy, they're out fishing or they're doing something. So, but yeah, no, good starting point for sure. All right, anyone else? Okay, we'll go ahead and no action on this tonight, and we'll fully expect to see this come back up as part of the budget process. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item N, city manager's report, and written report is provided in the laydown.
Okay, let's see. I'm just going to try and go through this again quickly. The first page of the manager's report is just dedicated to delinquent water and sewer accounts. So as of today for water and sewer, including finance charges, there are 13 accounts that owe the city a little under $24,000. And so the manager's report just talks about how we've been preparing people that we're going to start shutting off water starting in May. If they don't set up a payment plan or resolve their accounts that are in arrears. Another area in which, or a couple areas that there are delinquent accounts, are at the boat storage yard as well as the boat harbor. So there's 21 customers that are in arrears at the boat storage yard for a little over $46,000. And then there are 28 customers in the harbor that are in arrears for almost $14,000. So if we just look at those numbers, it's I think about $75,000 in unpaid bills and finance charges that the city is owed. And we're working on figuring out how to resolve delinquent accounts. The city does have a very old contract in place with a collection company called Cornerstone, but it's going to be something that we need to figure out how to handle. Coming up in April 1st, we're hoping to have that meeting council requested on coming up with an action plan for Jackaloff Bay Dock. And then on April 4th, Diane is going to be calling the council to see if you guys are available to review the draft FY21 audit statement. That's a really important meeting. We're going to talk about other things associated with the city's finances, but hoping for that to happen April 4th, because then just a few days later, on April 7th, the borough mayor would like to meet with the Soldovia City Council to talk about our financial situation. And perhaps we'll even have assembly members from the borough attend in person. So Mayor Campbell and I had a great meeting with Mayor Pierce, his chief of staff, the borough attorney, the borough finance director, and assembly members regarding the city's financial situation, and to see if there's any ways we could have collaborative governance or public-public partnerships between our two organizations. So please be on the lookout for that. April 10th through the 12th, myself and the finance officer are going to be in Anchorage attending Senator Murkowski's Infrastructure Grant Symposium. So she's bringing together all of the federal agencies that are issuing all of these bipartisan infrastructure bill grants and getting them together so you can ask questions. Tell them about your community's needs. This is going to be one of the ways where we use that CIP document is, hey, just so you don't forget about us, here's our CIP document. So that's coming up on April 11th. And then April 12th, the Alaska Municipal League is having an Alaska Infrastructure Planning and Assistance Workshop focused on topics like broadband, water and sewer, transportation, and grant preparation assistance. So we don't currently have, we will not have enough travel budget to cover that, but it is so important that I think, and I'm going to look at our budget to see how we can reallocate forecasted expenses so that myself and the finance officer can attend that. Boatyard Electric. So thanks to Diane and Leila, we got data from HEA that there's one HEA owned meter that feeds all of those other meters, which are owned by the city. A lot of them need TLC or maintenance, and it's our responsibility to fix that. And in the past 7 years, so April 2015 through February 2022, the boatyard had a little over $21,000 in electric fees that we paid. Healthcare costs, still working on getting a number for our budget so that we know what personnel expenses for health insurance will be. Moffitt and Nickel, they came to Soldovia March 1st and met with Layla and myself as well as Jordan and had a great conversation about what cost estimates they could come up with for us at no cost to help us with grant applications for improvements to the harbor as well as Jackaloff Bay Dock. Our volunteer fire chief, Andrew Maddox, resigned. The fire department will keep providing the fire response services in the meantime, and I'll let council know when there's any updates. The city clerk made amazing strides at doing something which is a part of our council's top priorities of finding lost revenue. We've ordered signs for the boat launch ramps as well as fee boxes. So that way people know that is a fee area. So that way it's not just Diane with her binoculars, like looking out the window to get people. So that'll be installed soon. The city's budget webpage has been updated as a city finance page. So if you ever have anyone asking you questions like, what were the results of that survey? Or what were the fee schedules again? Or what the heck are you doing with the permanent fund? You can just direct them to this website that has all of those documents on there. Soldovia Village Tribe and the Soldovia Chamber of Commerce and the City of Soldovia extended an invite to Senator Murkowski to attend the city's 60th anniversary event on July 3rd. The letter is enclosed, and it's just so great to see those partnerships coming up to fruition. And then in that same vein, Diane gathered all of the mayors of Soldovia from 1960 to 2022. And so the next step is we're going to invite either that mayor or their family to come celebrate the city's 60th anniversary this summer. And there was a period of time where we could not figure out who the mayor was. And I think it's in the 50s. So it's like a fun trivia question you can ask your fellow Soldovians. The list is in the packet if they know who that was. We have Homer people hopefully coming May 26th to Soldovia. There's information on the water and sewer certification requirements and why it's so hard for us to meet that best practice score. So we touched on that last meeting, and there's just an email stating the same information, that we won't even be level 1 certified with Operator Cameron until June of 2024. We put out a survey for refuse services outside of city limits, and so far the comments have been thanks, but no thanks. And then we're hoping to get our senior meals program back in person April 4th. It's just contingent on the COVID temperature in Soldovia. And then there's a bunch of other documents included in your packet, including a letter endorsing the Fuel and Lube's participation in the bulk fuel revolving loan program, an opportunity to be on the Alaska Marine Highway Operations Board virtual meetings, notice regarding changes to the Marijuana Control Board, an article about how the borough is hoping to change the Planning Commission or about the vacancies on the Planning Commission, and a resolution from Fairbanks opposing the reestablishment of a defined benefit program, which is PERS retirement related. Thank you so much for listening. That's all I have.
Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate that. Any questions or comments from anyone on council?
Mayor Campbell,
Yep, go ahead.
the missing mayor period, is Lou Collier on that list?
Let's see here. Darlene, I know, is on that list. Okay.
I'm just saying, let's just follow up on it. I believe
So the years in question aren't the 50s. It's 1965 through 1966. We couldn't find a record showing who the mayor was at that time. And I don't see a Collier on the list. I do see a Darlene Crawford, though.
I would just ask Darlene. She'll probably know.
Yeah.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, if John's done.
Who's that, Vivian?
Oh, if John is done, I have a couple of comments, questions.
Gotcha.
And
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Okay. I can't quite get the picture out of my mind, Rachel, of Diane with her binoculars looking out the city office to see who's parked or not parked. That's a beautiful image. Let's see, great report here. Thank you so much. The water and sewer and the accounts that are in their arrears, is that from this past year or is this running a couple of years back? Both water and sewer and then also the boat storage. Is that this year, last year? Rather?
No, through the mayor, Councilmember Rojas, I don't know what that time period is, but it's not this year or just last year. I think it's a few years ongoing.
Oh, okay. I thought we had got those all cleaned up. Okay. Another question is, as far as the KPB mayor coming here and helping up with our finances, what do you interpret that being? What's the rationale?
April 7th is when we're hoping to have the meeting. That's partly because the city, if there's powers in which we no longer wish to have, they can be transferred to the borough with assembly vote. And so there could be services in which the city, in trying to consolidate, wishes to see if there's a potential for transferring, or another way of saying that is a public-public partnership with the borough to see if there's ways they can help us with our operations.
Okay, good idea. And the boatyard electrical fees, did we have that $21,000? Did we bill that out?
Not that I'm aware of, Councilmember Rojas. I do not believe we've billed people for that. And I think at one of our last discussions, Councilmember Swick was saying, you know, looking at the billing for the storage yard, it was just kind of factored in somehow, or.
Yeah, and I want to say that I'm trying to remember when I worked there, I might have billed a few people, but it was very like, yeah, who knows what meter works, and it was really weird before they switched or whatever, took it out completely.
Right. So yeah, if you average that out, that's about $3,000 a year. Again, are these lost revenues or are we accounting for them? So I'm glad to see this, but I think it's one of those things we need to see how that's being accounted for and either have it in the billing or start charging people for using the electricity. Otherwise, I think I don't think there was anything else. I don't think so. Thank you. It was a great report. Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, thank you, Vivian. Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, Vivian touched on both those subjects I had a question about, but I just want to make an additional statement. I am really surprised at those fees that we haven't collected for water and sewer. I mean, we really need to be a little bit more diligent about that, because I don't really want to pay my water and sewer bill either. And if you're not going to turn off my water, then maybe I won't pay it either.
Well, through the mayor, Councilmember Sweat, I know that the city did suspend turning off water and late fees during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I don't know if that's where we kind of got.
Yeah, that's a little different. If that's the case, then I'll retract my statement. But yeah, and about those electric fees, I know when we touched on it the last time, I mean, we really need to be more diligent about collecting those fees rather than just saying, well, we really don't know, you know. I mean, if people are going to use our electric, then they'll have to be charged for it, you know. And I don't know how to work on that with those meters we have. I mean, I guess, I don't know. But I guess we'll either have to fix them if they're broken or something. So anyway, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Bobby. Anyone else? Okay, yeah, good report, Rachel. And yeah, same thing. I won't beat a dead horse, but I will say when it comes to budgetary constraints and all of the above, yeah, the electric in the boatyard has to get sorted out. We don't have to make money on that, but we certainly cannot continue to subsidize and pay that. We have to come up with some sort of simple, small monetary fee to at least cover costs. Now, that might be easier said than done, like anything that we typically try to do after the fact with, not having separate meters and stuff. But down the road here, we got to figure that out. So again, it's a death by 1,000 cuts, and that's what's killing us. So every one of these little 20,000 here, 10,000 here, 40,000 there, you start adding it up, and pretty soon it's a couple $100,000. It's just going away in the wind. So to put it nicely, so we should definitely look at some sort of solution on that. Just keep that on your list of one of many small but non-priority items to solve going forward. So other than that, that's all I have. Anyone else?
Mayor Campbell,
Yep, go ahead.
I apologize for, but I can't get away from it. Those meters that are not currently working, is there any way they can just be turned off until we can sort this out? The availability of electricity?
Yeah. HEA can come and they have to do a site visit to shut off the power to the site, and then we can do the tests on our own meter. So it's going to be it's a more involved project to see which ones actually don't work, which ones actually do work. And then for the ones that don't work, or the ones that do work that we want to make improvements on, that would be the time. And then we turn the power back on.
I was just referring to maybe if it wouldn't cost us a whole lot, maybe we could stop the bleeding until we could figure out what we're gonna do.
Oh, so you're saying shut power off completely?
Well, no, just to the meters that are in op. Just to the meters that are in op.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just so I'm clear, not shutting off power altogether, just the inoperable meters.
Correct.
Okay, yep. Yeah, we don't want to rock the boat. Obviously, everyone's going to be getting ready to get their vessels ready here for spring fishing season. So, okay, nope, good enough.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I just have one more question in regards to that. I think the last time we discussed this meter thing, I can't remember if I asked this question or not, but do we get charged for every meter that's there?
No, because there's only one HEA meter
Oh,
and all the rest of the meters are ours.
oh, okay, thanks.
Okay, all right, we'll go ahead and move on here. Thank you, Rachel, for your report. Item O, informational items not requiring action. O1, depending on city council availability, there will be a special meeting on April 1st at 3 p.m. to discuss options regarding the Jackaloff Bay Dock Action Plan, and special meeting on April 4th at 3:30 to discuss the FY23 fee schedule, including inflation, business license fees, water and sewer rates, mortgage rates, port fees, and harbor parking. Item O2, Seldovia City Office will be closed Monday, March 28th in observance of Seward's Day. Item P, executive session, none. Item Q, council and mayor comments concerning items not on the agenda. Sweat.
Yeah, I want to thank Heidi, who I know does most of this research, for all her hard work. She's really doing a terrific job, as is Rachel. And will you please tell Diane, thanks for bringing in a few dollars to the city coffers with her watchful eye.
Okay, thank you. Rojas.
Yes, just a big thank you to staff and council. I think we're doing a really good job. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vivian. Kennedy.
Would a new business item be appropriate at this time?
Yeah, you can comment on anything that's not on here.
I just have one question. The lights at the city shop building, they're on all night long, correct?
Maybe I'll look into that.
Yeah, I had one complaint about the lights being on all night long and wondered if we couldn't conserve some energy with maybe putting them on some type of motion sensor, or maybe building some type of reflector so they didn't shine up in the neighborhood, but would still serve their purpose. Other than that, I don't have anything. And Just a comment. I appreciate the efforts of everybody, including Vivian and you know, the losses and maybe directing that money towards the harbor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Swick,
No comment.
Peyton,
Lots of information, another good meeting. Thanks, guys.
okay, thank you, Harmony. Same thing. Appreciate all the information and thanks to everyone that attended this evening and provided comment. Let's see. Next regular meeting will be on April 11th, 2022 at 6 p.m. and I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a second? Okay, any objection? Okay, hearing none, we are adjourned. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening tonight.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Good night.